Hello, I'm EAC Commissioner Ben Hovland. Today's video conversation is taking place as we mark the 50th anniversary of the ratification of the 26th Amendment, which lowered the legal voting age in the United States from 21 to 18. To celebrate this momentous occasion, I'm pleased to be joined by Boulder County, Colorado Clerk and Recorder Molly Fitzpatrick and Boone County, Missouri Clerk Brianna Lennon to highlight their efforts engaging younger Americans in our democracy. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining me today. To kick things off, can each of you tell us a little bit more about your jurisdiction or county? I guess we'll go in alphabetical order. So Molly, if you could go first.
Great, thank you so much for having me. My name is Molly Fitzpatrick, and I'm the Boulder County Clerk and Recorder in Boulder County, Colorado. Boulder County is a jurisdiction with approximately 230,000 active registered voters. And we have a heavy population of young people here in Boulder County. We are home to the CU Boulder campus, which is the flagship university in Colorado. And the CU Boulder campus has approximately 35,000 students, and about 40% of those are actually out-of-state students. So that in and of itself has a unique challenge with it. We also have Front Range Community College campus, which is a commuter campus in Longmont, Colorado, and that campus serves approximately 1,800 students. And then, of course, we have high schools in Boulder County. We have 23 high schools in Boulder County that we work with to ensure that the young voters are prepared to participate and also get registered to vote and learn more about the elections process.
That's great. Brianna?
And thank you for putting on this panel and curating it. I think it's really interesting to hear from other election authorities that have similar demographics. I'm the county clerk in Boone County, Missouri. We are the home of the flagship campus for the University of Missouri. So it's just over 20,000 students that go to the University of Missouri, but we do have some smaller colleges as well that make up a very robust university town. So we are a moderately sized population. We have about 125,000 registered voters. And we really try to lean into the fact that we are a college community, and it's given us a lot of ability to interact with college students, high school students, and work to try to get people involved at all ages.
That's great. And, you know, obviously, you all are both great election officials and have college towns in your jurisdiction, so very appropriate for this topic. And you know, I know all election officials, you know, want everyone to vote, but can each of you talk about, you know, particularly the makeup of your jurisdictions, you know, why engaging younger Americans in the voting process is so critical? Brianna, if you want to kick us off this time, that'd be great. First this time.
Sure. So I think it's been fairly established that voting really is a habit, and it's one that helps if you start young so that people get used to the process of voting. But it's also one of those things that habit can be broken or disrupted by changes in where you live, or even just changing your address can disrupt that habit if you've got a good kind of flow. I know I go to my polling place. I know the busy times for it and things like that. And that's especially true for college students and graduating high school seniors. So like Molly had said, we have a lot of out-of-state students as well. So a lot of our voter education has to be broad enough to encompass voters that are not necessarily wanting to register locally, but they still want to participate in the process. And so we try to give them that opportunity. And just generally in terms of the importance of getting students and new voters comfortable and familiar and actively participating in elections, it's really important, not just for having a voice in our democracy, but also for participating and helping elections be administered in the first place. We utilize a lot of college students for poll working. We have a lot of election judges that come straight from the university. We also have a lot of high school students that we use at our polling places. And so it just makes sense from a perspective of having a seat at the table when it comes to how our elections are run, to be able to have young voters taking an active role.
That's great. Molly, if there's anything you want to contribute, I know you've got a long history of engaging young voters. It'd be great to hear a little of your perspective.
Great. Well, so much of what Brianna just mentioned, building that habit early on and building that voting muscle early on is so important. And I think that is in large part due to the circles of influence that high school students and young voters are often find themselves in, either with parents or teachers, guidance counselors, youth group leaders. Those are all influencers in a young person's life. And some of those folks are people that are experienced with the voting process. So no matter what, the first time you do anything, it's likely very overwhelming, whether it's, actually very challenging to vote, or whether it's just perceived that it's challenging to vote. So I think by having those community of influencers involved the first time you go to register to vote and vote is so critical. And I think that does speak to Brianna's point about, there can be disruptions later on. And we see that in some of the data here in Colorado that 18-year-olds have really high participation rates. And then there can be a decline in that participation rate as the first few years after that. And I think that really goes to show that we need to ensure that teachers are prepared to support students and guidance counselors, even though everyone is, of course, already so overwhelmed with the existing duties that they have just to educate the next generation. But this is such an important piece to our democracy. And so I think that's why it is just so critically important. And the last thing that I would offer is that research shows that the first three, if you vote in 3 consecutive elections, you're more likely to become a voter for life. And that's what we want to see, is lifelong voters. And so we want to kickstart that process as soon as someone is eligible to either pre-register, register to vote, and then vote.
I know I turned 18 in a presidential election year, so the 26th Amendment, helped me get engaged and have that coming of age experience of voting, and it stuck. So I think there's definitely some truth to that. One thing, Molly, I wanted to hit on, Boulder County won a 2020 Clearinghouse or Cleary Award this year for your new high school registration program. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what motivated your office to take action, and what steps you'd recommend for other election officials who would like to do something similar?
Yes, thank you for that question. We were honored to receive the award for our high school program, and we appreciate the recognition. So in 2019 in Colorado, we had an elections omnibus bill, and one of the aspects of that, or one of the provisions in that bill, allowed for 17-year-olds who are going to be 18 by the general election to participate in both the presidential primary and the statewide primary. We also had an existing statute or provision on the books that said high school should have a deputy registrar to support voter registration and voting. And we really saw that provision as an opportunity to leverage engagement in a way that we had not seen in Colorado before. And so we also knew that we needed a strategy to ensure that those 17-year-olds and their families knew about their new right to participate. We also wanted it to be something that was institutional, something that could be one day be operationalized within the schools themselves. And again, this is because we really tie back to that teachers and administrators are in those positions of influence. They have credibility and they have trust with students. And so because they're such a trusted source of information, we knew that if we could get them enrolled early on in this effort, we would be so much more better for it. We would be more effective and we'd have better success with the program. So one of the things that we did was we wrote a proclamation, and we asked that the school districts sign on to the proclamation. And that proclamation designated a week in February, which was before the presidential primary, as High School Voter Registration Awareness Week. And it was designed to create buzz and enthusiasm for this new provision in state law. And the proclamation encouraged the schools to identify a voter registration liaison who could act as a clearinghouse for anything voting related. And so it also requested and promoted the idea of voter registration drives in the high schools. And it loudspeaker announcements and posters and anything that we could do to create visibility and buzz around 17-year-olds participating in the primaries, 16-year-olds getting pre-registered to vote, because we do have that in Colorado. And we also did anything that students had ideas around. I actually appeared on Monarch High School's Cougar TV program and talked with one of the high school students about their efforts to ensure that their peers were registered to vote. So it was an incredibly successful endeavor. And it really goes to show that when you engage the people that are really involved in students' lives early on, you're so much more likely to be successful. At least that's what we found in Boulder County.
That's great. And I know we've seen, I've definitely seen it in some states where there are competition, friendly competitions amongst the high schools for voter registration percentage and things like that really have yielded great results as well. And sort of along those lines, Brianna, if you want to start us off this time, can you talk about some of the unique tools or ways that you've involved young people in the voting process, or some of your engagement strategies regarding young voters and voter participation?
Sure. So one of the biggest things that we do is our state law allows us to have a youth election participant program, and that allows us to have 15, 16, 17-year-olds at the polling places on election day. And they can work and pretty much do everything short of actually issuing a ballot to a voter, but it gets them experience with how polling places operate. It removes some of that mystery that can prevent them from, feeling overwhelmed, as Molly was saying. It can be a very intimidating process if you have not done it before. So many of them, I always ask them if they have, gone to the polls with their parents or things like that before, but they all have to be nominated by their teachers. And so they're all very enthusiastic. And we've seen a really good return too for our ones that age out of the youth election participant program to become election judges. So we have about a quarter of them that serve at least once as a youth election participant, come back and serve again as a youth election participant. And then maybe about half of those people come back and stay as poll workers, which is great considering once they turn 18 and go to college, they may not be living here anymore. So it's become a really nice pipeline, but it's also allowed them to inform their friends and their own spheres of influence and really lean into social media and kind of play up the fact that they are participating in democracy. We also got to kind of expand that during the pandemic. So one of the advantages that actually came out of 2020 was that we needed more poll workers, but not necessarily to do regular election judge tasks. We also needed them to help maintain lines at the polling locations and try to make sure that everything was safe. And so we just needed extra people to be there to make the process go a little bit smoother. And so we could utilize some of our past youth election participants, bring in new ones, and just kind of give them that experience. And our election judges like that as well, because then they get a little bit of a break. But it's done a lot to kind of create a buzz around the high school students that know when an April election is coming up, then this is a program that they can be participating in. And at the one of the other things that we tried to do last year that we will be recreating this year is a I voted sticker contest, just to get people thinking about it and building relationships with our social studies teachers so that when we come in to do voter registration, we have a bit more of a foundation. A lot of it has been about building those relationships so that people recognize that registering to vote is something that you should do once you get to 17 and a half years old. And my favorite part of the I voted sticker contest was the winner was someone that was turning 18 for the 2020 election. So she got to cast her first ballot and get an I voted sticker that she designed.
And that was a great sticker. Certainly, it was one of the ones that we would like to highlight in the new Cleary Sticker Award. Also saw some great submissions from Colorado. A lot of creativity, and it is a great way to have some fun with this, particularly for a job that can be so difficult so much of the time. That was a great sneak preview that we'll come back to in a second on poll workers that I'd love to dive a little deeper into. But before that, Molly, if you want to jump in there on, you mentioned, you talked about the high school program earlier, but other strategies you've used, maybe ways you've been able to gauge that your efforts are working to engage young people, that'd be great.
Sure. So a couple of things. I think the results for the high school program are something that we're really excited about, and we're looking forward to building upon these results even more and expand to the rest of the state. For the presidential primary, we had the highest youth voter turnout for ages 17, 18, and 19-year-olds in the metro area, and for counties with over 100 voters in that age bracket who are registered to vote. So we're thrilled about those results. And we also have the highest statewide turnout for ages 20 to 24 in the presidential primary, which I think demonstrates when we have policies that support young voters, they will use them. So for example, in Colorado, we have voter pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. So when you are pre-registered to vote, you will receive a ballot for the first election that you are eligible in. So that's a really important step in our process, because it gets a young person thinking about what their role is in our democracy started before they're even eligible to vote. We also have certain requirements around drop boxes on college campuses, vote centers or polling places on certain campuses. We also have friendly policies now that we actually just implemented that will allow voters to register online with their social security number, and instead of having to have a Colorado state ID. So all of those things are really important for voters, especially when Brianna mentioned as well, a heavy out-of-state student population. This is a really great provision for those students. We also have I'll say that, one of the things that I think is most important about requirements around college campuses serving as vote centers is that students are really campus centric. They don't necessarily go off campus a whole lot. They're not really familiar with the larger community around them. They are very focused. They can make their way around that campus so well, but then when you get off campus, you're not as familiar with those bus routes. You're not as familiar with how to navigate through the town. And so finding locations or finding your voting location, if it's not on campus, can be very intimidating and can deter someone from voting. So I think, that on top of the partnerships that we've had with the universities here in Boulder County to ensure that they are communicating the right information to students in a timely way to students as well. And again, we rely on that positions of influence, residence hall presidents and other campus administrators to get out the word about, deadlines, requirements, what they need to do to make sure that they're election ready. All of those things add up, and we work really hard to ensure that we've got a strong, collaborative, supportive relationship with the universities and with the high schools, because again, all of those folks are so overwhelmed with just fulfilling their duties as educating the next generation. We want to make sure that we're offering ourselves up to be as helpful as possible, because we all want the same thing, and that's to have an engaged electorate and to have students participating in every single election. Because again, if you're the more elections you participate early on, the more likely you are to be that lifelong voter. And so we see our role as supporting all of these administrators and educators and helping to fulfill that aim.
That's great. Thinking about, you both sort of hit on the area that, we know from social science and research around it, that, that familiarity with the process makes a difference. And, one of the things that I really look at as one of the silver linings of the 2020 election was seeing a new generation of Americans step up and serve as poll workers. Obviously, we know from the Election Administration and Voting Survey, or EVES survey, that traditionally most poll workers are over age 60. That number dropped some this year, sneak preview of upcoming EVES data. But wanted to talk about how you all have recruited young people to serve as election workers. Brianna, you mentioned earlier, obviously Missouri state law allows for some folks to participate when they're younger, but and obviously that's certainly a recommendation. But what else would you recommend to election officials or your colleagues around the country who want to engage young voters and recruit younger poll workers?
I think just as Molly was saying, the importance of having a place to vote on campus is really important. And we found that we opened a vote center in our athletic stadium, and every poll worker application that we got from somebody at the university was asking to be placed there. So there's a very strong association, I think, between, you know, doing an activity that is related to the university, because so many college students are participating in different organizations or have classes that might give them extra credit and things like that. And it helps kind of narrow the gap if you put the polling place or whatever it is that you're going to be doing related to the election close to the students. It improves the number of students that you're going to have asking to get involved. And then the voters themselves are also students that are able to participate in the process. So you get a win in both directions. And then I think the other thing that is really important that we haven't mentioned yet is the importance of social media and bringing in new poll workers and even new voters just through connecting on social media. We try to do a lot more of. I always encourage other county clerks. I know that it's one more thing that gets added to the list of communication tactics that we have to do, but it really does pay back in dividends when you're talking to a new generation of voters if you're engaging where they already are on social media.
That makes a lot of sense. We can't all be as good at TikTok as you are, but we can try. So Molly, I don't know if you have anything that you would add on the recruiting of young poll workers, but again, I think it's really an area that you know, I've seen it be a great experience for folks. I know that particularly as we get more and more technology in the polling place, it matters. And so would love your thoughts on that as well.
Thank you. And everything Brianna said, the only additions that I would add is, you know, consider your outreach materials. One thing that we did for our high school voter registration awareness week program was we gave it its own twist. We gave it its own little brand because we wanted something that was more youth friendly, something that felt a little bit more accessible. And so that's, you know, we designed a unique poster and brand and logo for it. And we think that that really helps because it just helps the young voters feel a little bit more connected and resonated to the office. And so just as Brianna was saying, social media is so important. And alongside that, having a brand that does speak to young people, I think is really, really important. You know, one thing that we did was we ran our materials by an 18-year-old and asked for feedback on it. And we took that feedback in. And on top of that, we want to make sure that the election judges, the student election judges, come back year after year because they build that competency and that awareness. They can grow and develop into new and bigger positions. And we think that one of the most important things that we could be doing for retention is giving them a meaningful way to participate, showing them the process end to end and taking that time to invest in their own learning and their own development so that they can have that awareness of how the whole, you know, picture ties together. And so that's one thing that, or those are two things that we did that we think, you know, will keep people coming back year after year.
That's great. And if we do have any, hopefully we've got some young people watching this, and if not, they can maybe get relayed to them. You know, if there are young people out there, you know, who are watching this or are told to watch this at some point, you know, and they want to be involved in elections or public service, what advice would you have for them? Molly, if you want to kick us off here.
Sure. First and foremost, get registered to vote. And if you're 16 or 17, check if your state has voter pre-registration laws, and you can do that by going to your county clerk's office, website, or the Secretary of State's office. You know, learn when elections are because they happen at different times in different states, and we hear about the national elections all of the time, but we don't always hear about these local elections, which are as important. And so we want to make sure that, you know, young people have information about when local elections are, in addition to the federal elections. I'd also say use every opportunity you can to get involved, whether it's registering your friends to vote or joining a club, something that is interesting to you, whatever it may be, because you'll be making that impact on your community, and you'll also be learning something about yourself and what avenue of public service you might want to go into as you grow older and as you learn more. And so I think that's some of the most important things that, young people can be doing, is just getting involved early on and just start somewhere. One thing that I always did was overthink everything growing up and when I was in high school, and was, just start somewhere and you'll figure it out as you go. And just remember that your local elections office and your Secretary of State's office is a great resource in order to find out about those voting laws and that voting information. But overall, just get started somewhere and you'll go far.
Absolutely. Brianna, would you add anything to that?
I think the only thing I would add is always feel free to call or email or reach out to the Secretary of State's office or your local election office, because so many times I think when we're talking to an organization or we're talking to a student group, we hear these questions that I think are fairly easily answered if only they knew to come to our office first. And the other thing that happens when we find out commonly asked questions is that we can address them in a more comprehensive way. And so it hopefully helps more people as well. So never, ever, ever be afraid to call us or email us. There is no stupid question when it comes to participating in elections. We know that it's extremely complicated. We know, especially when you're trying to, come into town and you've never lived here before and you're just starting school and you're trying to deal with that as well, that voting is not necessarily at the top of the list, but we try to make it as easy as possible. And so never be afraid to reach out.
Well, I think that's a great reminder, particularly in this time as we continue to live with the challenges of mis and disinformation in the election space, exactly why your state and local election officials are that trusted source info and the place to go to get information. And so for anybody watching this, you've got two great examples that joined us today on why you should reach out to your local election officials. And so, with that, I'd like to thank you both for joining us today for this great conversation in recognition of the 50th anniversary of the ratification of the 26th Amendment. For anyone watching over 18 years of age, please make sure you're registered and your registration information is up to date. If your state allows pre-registration, check that out too. And consider serving as a poll worker. You heard it here today. It's a great way to help your community and our democracy. And so thank you all for joining us.